So, a federal judge just issued an arrest warrant for one of Trump's own appointees, and the charges are absolutely devastating. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching a sitting attorney general face potential jail time for covering up evidence in a case that could bring down the entire administration. But guess what? The documents the judge just unsealed show a systematic pattern of obstruction that goes all the way to the top. We're talking about someone who was supposed to uphold the rule of law, someone who swore an oath to the Constitution, now staring down criminal contempt charges because they chose loyalty to Trump over their duty to the American people. And trust me, when you see what this judge found, you'll understand why legal experts are calling this the biggest constitutional crisis since Watergate. Let me fill you in on what's been happening, because this story has layers that go deeper than anyone expected. So Matthew Whitaker became acting attorney general back in November 2018, right after Trump forced Jeff Sessions out. He stepped into one of the most powerful positions in American government with zero Senate confirmation, which was already raising eyebrows. From the get-go, Whitaker seemed like the perfect Trump loyalist. He'd spent months on cable news defending the president, criticizing the Mueller investigation, and arguing that special counsel probes should have strict limits. Whether it was refusing to recuse himself from overseeing the Russia investigation despite obvious conflicts, slow-walking document requests from Congress, or publicly defending Trump's most controversial actions, Whitaker really cemented himself as someone willing to put the president's interests above institutional integrity. He wasn't there to be an independent law enforcement official. He was there to be Trump's shield. But here's where the rubber meets the road. We're now 15 months into multiple federal investigations examining potential obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and abuse of power. Congressional subpoenas are being ignored. Critical testimony is being blocked. Thousands of pages of documents that could prove criminal activity are locked away in Justice Department vaults. This mess is unfolding because Trump's legal team and Whitaker's DOJ are at a standstill over what evidence must be turned over to federal prosecutors and congressional committees. And guess who's stuck right in the middle? Yep, Matthew Whitaker. He's supposed to be the nation's chief law enforcement officer, the person who ensures justice is administered fairly and without political interference. But here's the kicker. Trump isn't interested in fair administration of justice. He wants absolute protection from accountability, and he's made it crystal clear that anyone who doesn't provide that protection becomes his enemy. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. The position of Attorney General was specifically designed to be independent from presidential pressure. That's why we have these institutional safeguards. That's why attorneys general are supposed to serve the Constitution, not the president personally. Now, back to the matter at hand. Reports from around October 28th revealed just how furious Federal District Judge Reggie Walton was becoming with the Justice Department's handling of evidence. He labeled Whitaker's approach to document production as disingenuous at best and potentially criminal at worst, and even went as far as to say that the pattern of behavior suggested a coordinated effort to deceive the court and obstruct ongoing investigations. Talk about strong words. Essentially, Judge Walton was calling Whitaker a liar and accusing him of criminal conspiracy for not complying with lawful court orders to produce evidence. And this wasn't a private conversation. Judge Walton made sure to air his grievances publicly in a scathing 42-page order, making it clear that he was not happy with how the Attorney General was handling his constitutional obligations. This announcement sent shockwaves through the legal community because it raised all sorts of questions. If Judge Walton, a George W. Bush appointee with an impeccable reputation for fairness, could turn against the nation's top law enforcement officer with this level of fury, what did that mean for everyone else in Trump's orbit scrambling to avoid accountability? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern with Trump. His loyalty really only extends to himself. Whenever someone stops being useful or does something he doesn't like, he's quick to turn on them. We've spotted this pattern time and time again. Just think about how he turned on Jeff Sessions right after Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. Sessions had been one of Trump's earliest supporters. A senator who stuck his neck out when supporting Trump wasn't popular in Washington. But the moment Sessions followed the ethical rules and stepped aside from a case where he had clear conflicts, Trump spent 2 years publicly humiliating him, calling him weak, stupid, and disloyal. Eventually, Sessions was forced out the day after the 2018 midterm elections. Then there was Rex Tillerson, Trump's first Secretary of State. Trump wasn't pleased when Tillerson tried to conduct actual diplomacy rather than just echoing whatever the president tweeted that morning. Tillerson called Trump a moron in private meetings. And when that leaked, his days were numbered. Trump fired him via Twitter while Tillerson was on a plane, not even having the decency to tell him directly. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Michael Cohen when his longtime personal lawyer and fixer started cooperating with federal prosecutors. For over a decade, Cohen had been Trump's pit bull, handling hush money payments, threatening lawsuits, and doing whatever dirty work Trump needed. But the moment Cohen flipped and started telling prosecutors about Trump's financial crimes and campaign violations, suddenly Trump barely knew the guy. He was just a low-level employee who did some minor legal work, Trump claimed, even though Cohen had been at Trump's side for major business deals and throughout the 2016 campaign. Even Mike Pence faced a similar fate when he refused to overturn the 2020 election results. After 4 years of absolute loyalty, after defending every Trump scandal and standing silently through every controversy, Pence followed his constitutional duty on January 6th. And what did that get him? A mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," while Trump watched on television and did nothing to protect his own vice president. Now, it looks like Matthew Whitaker is in the hot seat, discovering that being Trump's protector comes with an expiration date. This pattern is becoming all too familiar. You can show all the loyalty in the world and defend Trump every single day, but the moment you step out of line or cease to be useful, he'll toss you aside without a second thought. And worse, he'll sacrifice you to save himself if that's what it takes. So, what did Whitaker do to tick off Judge Walton and put himself in legal jeopardy? Well, it all boils down to whether the Justice Department would comply with lawful subpoenas and court orders demanding the production of documents related to ongoing investigations. The impasse happened because House Democrats wanted full access to unredacted evidence, including grand jury materials, witness testimony, and internal DOJ communications, while Whitaker and Trump's legal team were trying to claim executive privilege over virtually everything. Ultimately, critical evidence just sat in locked DOJ safes since no one was willing to budge. As acting attorney general, Whitaker decided to take a hardline stance. He refused multiple court orders and claimed that releasing the documents would compromise ongoing investigations and violate executive privilege. His approach seemed to be just run out the clock, delay everything, and hope that political dynamics would shift before he had to actually comply. At first, Trump seemed to be on board with this idea. He appreciates defiance of what he sees as partisan witch hunts and the notion of absolute executive power. Trump had publicly praised Whitaker for being strong and loyal, suggesting he was finally getting the kind of attorney general he always wanted. But here's where things started to go wrong. But as the standoff dragged into its 4th month, some serious issues started cropping up. Public support for Trump's stonewalling was eroding, multiple federal judges were issuing increasingly angry orders, and the obstruction itself was becoming a bigger scandal than whatever the original investigations were examining. While Whitaker was steadfast and holding his ground, predictably, the public began to shift their blame toward the administration for making a mockery of congressional oversight and judicial authority. Polls indicated that Americans were increasingly frustrated with what looked like a cover-up, with 67% saying they believed Trump was hiding criminal activity. This was the moment Trump began to sweat a little. You see, Trump values his public image, his poll numbers, and overall avoiding anything that makes him look weak or guilty. He doesn't want to be tied to an attorney general that's facing criminal contempt charges and creating headlines about constitutional crises. That's definitely not the victory he seeks. And then Whitaker went ahead and made a move that, according to Trump, was a serious misstep. Whitaker started looking for ways to compromise with Judge Walton, figuring he should avoid an arrest warrant and potentially comply with at least some of the document requests. He even considered releasing redacted versions of certain materials to show good faith cooperation. But then, when Trump caught wind of all this, he absolutely lost it. In Trump's eyes, compromising is just a sign of weakness. Considering compliance with a lawful court order, that's pure betrayal. Any member of his administration who dares to follow the law over Trump's personal directives is instantly labeled a traitor. According to sources inside the White House who spoke to Politico, Trump erupted when he learned Whitaker was even discussing potential compliance. "He's supposed to be protecting me, not caving to these witch hunt judges," Trump reportedly screamed during a meeting with senior advisors. Trump allegedly told Whitaker that if he released even a single page of documents, "You'll be gone faster than Sessions, and everyone will know you're a coward." Now, this left Whitaker in a tight spot. On one side, he really needs Trump's backing to maintain his position. The Trump base will drop him like a hot potato if Trump gives the signal, and Whitaker's entire political future depends on staying in Trump's good graces. Without Trump's support, Whitaker goes from powerful attorney general back to being a relatively unknown former U.S. attorney from Iowa. On the flip side, he actually has to deal with the reality that federal judges can hold him in criminal contempt. That means figuring out how to avoid arrest, comply with lawful court orders, and maintain at least some semblance of professional credibility in the legal community. You can't be attorney general from a jail cell. and you can't practice law if you're disbarred for contempting court. The tricky part is all of that requires some level of cooperation with judicial authority and following the actual law, which are precisely the things Trump has forbidden him from doing. So Whitaker is caught in a bind. He can either keep trying to please Trump, which means continuing to defy court orders, and that only makes the legal jeopardy worse and paints the entire Justice Department in a terrible light. Or he can do his actual job as Attorney General, which means complying with Judge Walton's orders and producing the documents, but that'll definitely make Trump turn against him and cost him his position. It's a tough situation, and that's the mess Trump creates for his subordinates. He demands complete loyalty and wants them to break laws and defy courts without budging, but then he points fingers when things go south. He's not shy about tossing them under the bus whenever it suits him, and he offers zero protection when they face consequences for following his orders. This whole scenario is causing major stress within the Justice Department and Trump's legal team. If Trump has turned on Whitaker and is willing to publicly undermine his own attorney general, every member of Trump's team is left wondering if they're the next target. The message is clear. Your loyalty to Trump doesn't guarantee his loyalty to you. Those career prosecutors and DOJ officials who are trying to balance their oath to the Constitution with pressure from political appointees are now worried sick about being the next one to get tossed aside. Many are reportedly updating their resumes and reaching out to former colleagues about private sector opportunities, unwilling to sacrifice their professional reputations for an administration that offers no protection in return. Meanwhile, the hardline Trump loyalists believe Whitaker isn't loyal enough and that he's too open to compromise. They wanted someone who would burn down the Justice Department before complying with what they see as illegitimate Democratic harassment. Things became even more intense when William Barr, Trump's nominee for permanent Attorney General, broke away from Whitaker's approach. Barr had been positioning himself as someone who would protect Trump, but do so within legal boundaries. He'd been pushing for a more sophisticated strategy that would slow-roll document production while appearing to cooperate. Barr criticized Whitaker for creating an unnecessary constitutional showdown when strategic compliance could have achieved the same protective goals without risking contempt charges. When someone as aligned with Trump's interests as Barr starts turning against you, you know you're in a world of hurt. Judge Walton decided enough was enough. On November 12th, he issued a ruling that legal experts are calling one of the most significant assertions of judicial authority in modern American history. Judge Walton didn't just order document production. He personally reviewed the withheld materials in camera, meaning he examined them privately in his chambers, and then issued findings that destroyed the Justice Department's legal arguments. Walton pointed out that the claim of executive privilege was constitutionally indefensible in this context. He wrote in his order, "The Attorney General's refusal to comply with lawful subpoenas and court orders represents a fundamental threat to the separation of powers. When the nation's chief law enforcement officer places himself above the law, the entire constitutional framework is imperiled." The legal process moved pretty quickly because Judge Walton recognized the urgency. After all, everyday documents remain hidden means ongoing obstruction of congressional oversight and criminal investigations. The implications for accountability and democratic governance grow more severe with each passing day. And let me tell you, the judge didn't hold back with the ruling. It was a major blow for Whitaker. Judge Walton declared that Whitaker's actions were undertaken in bad faith with the specific intent to obstruct justice and shield potentially criminal activity from legitimate scrutiny. That's legal speak for saying, you've got no solid ground to stand on here. There's no legal validity to what you're doing. You're just abusing your power to protect Trump, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. Judge Walton calling out the Attorney General by name and threatening him with arrest created a real stir. It's a significant move, reminding Whitaker that he isn't above the Constitution or the courts. A federal judge threatening the nation's top law enforcement official with arrest for contempt of court is huge. This is a huge deal that doesn't usually happen in functioning democracies. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen a federal judge come this close to arresting a sitting attorney general since the Saturday Night Massacre during Watergate. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor and frequent Fox News contributor, went on air and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that Whitaker's legal position was almost impossible to defend in any serious court of law, and that Judge Walton's findings represented a devastating indictment of how the Justice Department has been weaponized for political purposes. Just think about that for a moment. This is coming from someone who has spent years defending Trump and criticizing what conservatives call the deep state. When even Andrew McCarthy is saying the Attorney General is legally indefensible, that tells you how bad the situation has become. And this is coming from a conservative voice on Fox News, not some liberal activist. Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School, a leading constitutional scholar, mentioned that Judge Walton's order represents one of the clearest judicial rejections of executive overreach in American history. Tribe noted that the judge's findings create a legal framework that will constrain future attempts to use executive privilege as a blanket shield against oversight. When legal experts from both sides start tossing around terms like constitutional crisis and obstruction of justice, that's the moment to really pay attention. This isn't partisan spin. These are serious legal minds recognizing that we're watching something unprecedented unfold. So, let's break down what this showdown could mean, because it's not just a captivating legal drama. It has serious consequences for how our government operates and whether anyone can be held accountable. First up is the immediate political fallout. Whitaker is already facing significant backlash due to his role in blocking congressional investigations, and his approval ratings are dismal even among Republicans. GOP representatives are getting anxious about the 2020 election cycle, which is definitely adding to the tension. The last thing vulnerable Republicans want is to be defending an attorney general who's facing arrest for contempt of court. Judge Walton's order and the threat of Whitaker being arrested doesn't help that political situation. And honestly, that's not the best look for the administration. Most folks in America have a good deal of respect for federal judges as a vital part of our system of checks and balances, even if they don't always agree with specific decisions. Seeing Trump's attorney general defying court orders creates an impression of lawlessness that extends beyond Whitaker himself. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Whitaker believes he's above the Constitution and does not hold the rule of law in high regard, and they'll have Judge Walton's 42-page order backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Trump's administration has no respect for institutional constraints or legal accountability. You can expect to see Judge Walton's findings popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates throughout 2020. Every time Trump claims he's the law and order president, Democrats will point to his attorney general facing contempt charges for defying court orders. Now let's touch on what this means for the Justice Department itself. For decades, attorneys general from both parties have worked hard to keep the DOJ out of partisan political battles, wanting it to be viewed as above partisan influence and committed to impartial enforcement of the law. But by using his position to shield Trump from accountability, Whitaker's waded right into a political controversy that compromises the entire institution. Whitaker and his supporters are now poised to attack Judge Walton, implying bias and questioning his motives, which complicates things for the judiciary's image as a neutral arbiter of legal disputes. Trump has already started tweeting attacks on Judge Walton, calling him an Obama-appointed radical, even though Walton was actually appointed by George W. Bush. Yet, Judge Walton probably felt he had no other choice. If he stayed silent while the Attorney General openly defied court orders, the judiciary's credibility would take an even bigger hit. Courts only have power if their orders are followed. If the nation's chief law enforcement officer can simply ignore judicial commands, then the entire concept of rule of law becomes meaningless. This situation shines a massive spotlight on whether executive privilege can be used as an absolute shield against all oversight. At the heart of the issue is whether an attorney general can just refuse to comply with congressional subpoenas and court orders whenever the president claims executive privilege. If Whitaker gets his way on that, it could totally change how our system of checks and balances operates. The founders deliberately created a system where Congress has oversight authority over the executive branch, where courts can compel production of evidence, and where no one, not even the president or his appointees, is above the law. They designed it this way because they'd just fought a revolution against a king who claimed absolute authority. They understood that concentrated power without accountability inevitably leads to tyranny. That's why they created competing branches of government that could check each other's power. But Whitaker has always been uncomfortable with those limitations. He craves total control over what information Congress and courts can access, arguing for an expansive view of executive power that would have shocked the Founding Fathers. If courts can't compel the Attorney General to produce evidence, if Congress can't exercise oversight of the Justice Department, that's a significant boost to executive power beyond anything the Constitution contemplated, and it opens the door for future administrations to misuse that power even more aggressively. So the implications of this case reach far beyond just Whitaker and Trump. It's about shaping the structure of our constitutional system for many years to come. The precedent set here will determine whether future presidents can simply refuse all oversight by claiming executive privilege over everything. Each time Whitaker brushes aside norms, breaks laws, or attacks judicial authority, it weakens our democratic systems. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. Think about it. If an attorney general can refuse to comply with court orders without facing real consequences, what's to stop the next attorney general from doing the same? If Whitaker can just ignore subpoenas whenever Trump wants, what's to prevent another president from following that lead? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office. They become part of our new reality, part of the expanded playbook that future presidents will use. And that's pretty dangerous. Democracy relies on those norms and institutions, assuming that people in power will play by the rules, even when it's a bit inconvenient. When those norms crumble, democracy itself starts to falter. We're watching in real time whether our constitutional system is strong enough to constrain a president and attorney general who refuse to recognize any limits on their power. Looking ahead to the 2020 election, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects. We're still 11 months out from those elections, but the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go. If the story playing out is one of Trump's attorney general battling every institution, defying court orders, and facing arrest for contempt, that spells trouble for Republicans up and down the ballot. Voters usually don't reward chaos and dysfunction. They want stability and competence and respect for the rule of law. Right now, Whitaker isn't offering any of those things. He's offering a constitutional crisis, defiance of judicial authority, and the spectacle of the nation's top law enforcement official possibly being arrested. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring respect for the Constitution and rebuilding institutional integrity. After years of chaos under Trump, there are folks who believe that if you vote for them, the Justice Department will actually start working again. They're promising no more constant constitutional crises or squabbles with federal judges, just good old normal governance where officials follow the law. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some moderate Republicans who are exhausted by the daily drama and constitutional brinksmanship. The image of an attorney general facing arrest for defying a court order is exactly the kind of thing that makes persuadable voters question whether this is really the kind of leadership they want. So, here's the deal. A federal judge just threatened Trump's attorney general with arrest for defying court orders and covering up evidence. This isn't just about one official's legal troubles or political drama. It's about whether we genuinely have a constitutional system where the rule of law applies to everyone, or whether we're sliding toward a system where the president and his appointees can simply ignore any oversight they don't like. If Whitaker gets away with this, if he can defy court orders without facing real consequences, then we're basically saying the Constitution doesn't matter anymore. That would mean we're stepping into a completely new realm where executive power has no meaningful limits, where courts can issue orders that the government just ignores, and where oversight exists only when the president allows it. It's about so much more than just whether Matthew Whitaker goes to jail or keeps his job. It's about whether we genuinely have three co-equal branches of government that can check each other's power, or if we're just stuck with whatever the president's appointees decide to do, regardless of what courts or Congress say. So, keep an eye on this. Things are just heating up. Judge Walton has made his ruling, but whether Whitaker actually complies or faces arrest remains to be seen. Trump is already signaling he'll pardon Whitaker if contempt charges stick, which would create yet another constitutional crisis. The next few weeks are going to be crucial for determining whether our system of checks and balances still functions. The stakes have never been higher, the evidence of contempt stronger, and the outcome more unpredictable. We're watching whether a federal judge can actually hold the attorney general accountable, or whether executive power has grown so unchecked that even direct defiance of court orders carries no consequences. This ride is far from over.